Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jamie and today we are doing my March wrap up and April TBR. Yes, I cannot believe we are doing another wrap up already. I felt like I just did my February TBR wrap up. I felt like I was sitting in this exact same spot not that long ago. And then of course I just did my spring TBR board. So maybe that's why this all feels a little bit like, I don't want to say repetitive because there's definitely new stuff, but I'm just like, wow, the months are really flying by. It is already into the springtime of 2024 and honestly I'm feeling great about it because the spring is so beautiful here and I'm so happy for the warm weather, or to be getting into the warm weather now, and I just feel better. I feel better in the spring. I feel my best in the warm times, in the summer months. So I'm very, very happy that we are moving in that direction. Getting right into it, let's chat about everything that I read in the month of March. I read 7 books in March, which I do think is pretty good. I'm starting to realize that that's my average. 6 to 8 is really just what I can reasonably get through. If I go over, it's because of some extraordinary circumstances. But yeah, sitting in that 6 to 8 range per month feels really good to me. It feels like we are accomplishing a lot, especially because in the beginning of March, I was really not feeling like reading much. And that's why at the beginning I read mostly, only entirely via audiobook, which is totally fine. And I had a great time doing that. And then as the month progressed, I did get much more into my physical reading again. And I feel like I'm back to normal. So, there's always just those little slumpy moments, but we are pretty much out of it. First up in March, I read Your Utopia by Bora Chung. This is a sci-fi short story collection. I don't know if it's actually labeled as horror or thriller or what specifically it's labeled as, but the feeling is definitely emotional with a tinge of darkness behind these sci-fi stories, often compared to a Black Mirror episode or something. This is the first Bora Chung collection that I read, and I did enjoy this. I read this pretty quickly, actually. I felt like I got through it, but I don't think that many of the stories stuck in my mind. Thinking back now, I would have to look back at all the titles of the short stories to even remember what went on, but I do remember some of them, and I did remember enjoying it while I was reading it. This collection just didn't stick quite in my mind the way I was hoping it to. If you do really love existential sci-fi stories, I would absolutely recommend this. But honestly, if you are more into the speculative aspects, I would recommend Out There by Kate Folk over this collection. However, I'm still very interested in reading Bora Chung's first short story collection, which is called Cursed Bunny. I still am very, very interested in reading that. I did have a great time while reading this. I just wish that they would have stuck in my brain a little bit more. And then I was in the mood for some nonfiction audiobooks. I don't read much nonfiction, but so I don't really know why I was craving this, but I specifically wanted to read a nonfiction book via audio that was read by the narrator. And at the same time, I was starting to get into some fitness content, and it kind of led me down this path of the fitness industry in general is just very, very, very toxic. And I wanted to be proactive and recognize that taking a quote unquote health or fitness journey has a lot of negativity around it. And I wanted to just hear from people whose experiences were perhaps different than mine within this space. So I read a couple of nonfiction books on the topic of eating and anxieties around food and body image and things like that. So if these are not conversations that you feel comfortable engaging with, go ahead and just skip through the next 2 books. The first book I read was Hunger by Roxane Gay. I think the subtitle is A Memoir of My Body. This is exactly what it sounds like. It is a memoir from Roxane Gay, who is the prolific author and feminist writer. This was actually the first piece of writing that I'd read by Roxane Gay, at least that I can remember. I'm sure that I read Roxane Gay in college in some form, but I cannot remember. I certainly have not read any of her full-length books. So this was my first time reading a full-length piece from Roxane Gay, and it was a very difficult piece in a lot of ways. She talks about her experience as a fat woman in America, a fat Black woman in America. That's the terms that she used to describe herself, and but specifically how her situation, how her life changed after being sexually assaulted at a very young age. And it's very brutal to read, but Roxane Gay is such a wonderful writer, and I really enjoyed listening to the audiobook with her reading it, and it just like felt like this very intimate, personal experience, and it just felt like she was just telling you this story. But the primary focus of the book is on her experience trying to lose weight, and yeah, that is just, it's I mean, like, I really enjoyed this book, but it's just hard to read at various times because she's talking about how she felt so ostracized and how she feels constantly judged, and how the world is not meant for people like her. And it's just, to hear about someone's experience is just always very eye-opening, and it made me really consider a lot of things. Again, if the topic of food and disordered eating is difficult for you, just be aware that this book does go into that territory. But it was a wonderful memoir, and I really enjoyed Roxane Gay's storytelling, and I will absolutely read more from her in the future. After Hunger, the next book that I read was What's Eating Us? Women, Food, and the Epidemic of Body Anxiety by Cole Kasdan. This is a book that honestly I did not know anything about. It had very few reading ratings at the time that I picked it up. I think it's actually like very new. I think like released within the last 6 months. So it's very new, and I honestly wish this was just such a random choice for me because I had never heard of it. I was just literally going through my library catalog of this type of like journalistic memoir combination that I really love, or memoir theory combination like Roxane Gay's book, and this was on there, and I was like, yeah, I'll go ahead and give it a try. I was really feeling in the mood to just like consume facts. Like, I wanted data, I wanted journalism, I wanted something that was going to change the way that I thought or viewed something. And so I picked up this book, and yeah, I was actually really impressed with this. It is a lot more memoir than the title would lead you to believe. And actually, I don't feel like the title completely sets you up for the fact that this book is almost entirely and specifically about eating disorders of all different variations. And specifically, the author herself had a long-standing eating disorder, and it's a very personal look at how she has tried to overcome that eating disorder, and how that's very hard to do when just society as a whole has a really disordered view of food and constant pressure for women specifically to change their bodies by any means necessary. And it is just, yeah, it's again another tough book to read, but it also came with a lot of facts. It came at things from a lot of different angles. It was very intersectional. We had discussions from Black women and how eating disorders in minority cultures often go undiagnosed for a plethora of reasons. It also went into discussions about how eating disorders affect pregnant women, and fertility, which is an angle that I hadn't even considered before. And I thought that was really just very powerful and very interesting to hear about. So I was really just taken with the way that this book was done. I really enjoyed it. I would just say that my critique would be that the title, what I was expecting when I picked it up was more of a holistic view of how society and marketing has really warped our brains when it comes to what normal bodies look like, and the correlation between fitness and health and what your body actually looks like. So that's what I thought this book was going to be, but it's actually specifically about eating disorders and how prevalent they are in society, and about how it's virtually impossible to not look at food in some sort of disordered way, because it's just overbearing the way that we talk about food in such a negative fashion. So just know that when going into this book, just know that that's what it's about. And while I did really enjoy it, I would just say, yeah, it's really a tough subject matter at times. Whew. Okay, those were the two tough ones. I really enjoyed both of them. I gave them both 4 stars. Yeah, fantastic books, just really difficult subject matter. So moving on to some of the novels that I read. First up, we have The Mysterious Case of the Alberton Angels by Janice Hallett. I do have a full reading vlog where I read this and talked about it at length, but basically this is a mixed media murder mystery, but it's really not a murder mystery. It's more of like a true crime type element. It follows a journalist who is trying to reopen a cold case that was a very high profile case, and it was just completely unsolved, and a lot of things didn't make sense, and she wants to finally get to the bottom of it, but come to realize that some things are kept a secret for a reason. So she does get wrapped up in everything that's going on with the case. So very fun. Janice Hallett is absolutely just a blast to read. If you've never read a Janice Hallett, I think you absolutely should, but I don't know if I would start with this one, because I will not lie, this took every ounce of my brain power to figure out what was going on. And like, while I did really enjoy it, it's definitely a bit challenging to keep track of who's who and what's going on, and that's like really by design, because the case itself was so messy. Oh, and this is like not an actual true crime book. This is a fictionalized story based on the concept of true crime, but there's so much going on with this case, and like there's just loose threads everywhere, and it was hard for me to wrap my mind around at times. But Janice Hallett is so good at guiding us to the answers that she wants us to kind of come up with on our own. So it's just a lot of fun. And if you like trying to actually solve the mysteries, this is the way to do it, because of the media format. Like, you are getting information exactly at the same time as the journalist gets information, just due to the nature of it being like emails and things. So excellent book. If you love a puzzle box mystery, you should absolutely check out Janice Hallett stuff. And then I read Normal People by Sally Rooney, and that completed all of Sally Rooney's published novels that I had to read. I said that in a weird way, but what I meant is that when I finished this, I completed all of Sally Rooney's books. I was very happy to read them. No one forced me to read them. I did it of my own volition, and I was very happy about it. Normal People is a contemporary fiction novel. I'm sure I probably don't have to explain it to you, but it follows 2 people who start out in high school as kind of friends with benefits, I guess, for lack of a better term. And it is a romance, but it follows their life through college and even a little bit after. And it's about this relationship that they constantly struggle to define, and yet they keep finding themselves back in it. And honestly, my thoughts on it are really all over the place, because I love Sally Rooney's writing. She is just so clever, so witty, so poignant, but in this like very condensed writing style. You know, you can do so much with so little. So I do appreciate Sally Rooney for that. But I don't know that these 2 characters are really the ones that I connected with the most, just because, kind of similar to Conversations with Friends, I just would not find myself making the same decisions as these 2 characters. But that being said, they are very, very human. They really do feel like real people, because they constantly do things that you're just questioning all the time. But guess what? That's what people do, especially college students, like people who are just finding out who they are. And also, they've also both been through some difficult experiences in their young lives, and how does that shape them, and how does that affect their choices. And there's discussions about class, there's discussions about relationships and how we're meant to connect with each other and what it means to love another person, but also love yourself. There's of course a lot of commentary going on here, as per usual with Sally Rooney's writing, and I did really enjoy it. I just don't know if this is the pinnacle of Sally Rooney for me. I mean, I know it's not, because Beautiful World is the pinnacle of Sally Rooney for me, but I'm happy I read it. I just don't think I understand it completely. I think it was just like, if I would have read this at a different time of my life, or if I just would have been a person who is more inclined to have this kind of relationship, I might have enjoyed it more, but because of that, it was just okay. I gave it a 3.5 stars. And then for my book club, we read I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This is the originally published in 1997 speculative, I mean, they say it's sci-fi, but I don't know that I would classify it as sci-fi. I would classify it as existential horror. And this book is gaining a lot of traction because it has been recently re-released with an English translation. This was originally a French novel, I believe, and it's is kind of sweeping the literary space right now, and my curiosity absolutely got the best of me. I had to figure out what was going on here, and wow, this book is really unlike anything I've ever read before. It's very short. It's like less than 150 pages, but talk about doing a lot with a little. I feel like I could read this book 10 times and walk away with something completely different. This book blew my mind, and it also terrified me, like shocked me to my core. This book follows a group of 40 women who are living in a bunker. They have been imprisoned there, and they don't know why, and they don't know by who. They have been trapped there for over 20 years, and their day-to-day life is extremely strict. They're not allowed to touch each other. They are not allowed to have specific conversations, and they are just being held there completely against their will, and they really have no idea what's going on. They have no memories of being taken. So we are following a protagonist who was very young when this happens, much younger than the rest of the women, and so she essentially grows up inside this bunker. I don't want to say too much else because this is such a short book, and you really should just go in completely blind, except for the fact that you should know that for me, as much as I loved this book because the writing is fantastic, the story is engaging and terrifying, I think that for me, I just was not prepared for how much this was going to terrify me and give me such existential dread. Yeah, I mean, it is brutal in a lot of ways, but it's absolutely a piece of art. So if you can handle it, I absolutely recommend this book. It's fantastic. It's weird. And I'll say that like not everybody liked this in my book club. We were very, very split on what we felt about this book. And I think that's kind of great. It's really excellent to have a very in-depth discussion. And I think that the reasons that I liked it were the exact reasons that other people really didn't like it. So I can't really say who would or wouldn't like this kind of book, other than if you do not want to have your heart ripped out and experience existential dread, then probably stay away. But otherwise, this book is phenomenal. And finally, the last book I read in March was A Prayer for the Crown, Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the sequel to A Song for the Wild Built, so did end up completing both of these. Again, very, very short. I'm sorry to say it though, but I really did not like this book. And if I'm honest, I really didn't like the first one either. Like, I wanted to like these so much. I wanted to fall in love with them. I had such high expectations for them. And so maybe that's on me, maybe I just put these up way too high. But these, it's hard because so many people do love them, and I can completely see why people love them. They just did not do what they said they were going to do for me. Like, these are very cozy, very low plot, and they have a lot of philosophical discussions about humanity and the pressures of being human, and it's very comforting in a lot of ways. but to me, it's just too simple, and the conversations just feel really, I don't know, like they just feel really derivative, I guess. And I just found myself rolling my eyes. And I also didn't really like the writing. No, not even. I really disliked the writing, is the more correct way to say it. I did not like the dialogue. I didn't feel the world as much as I want to feel. Yeah. No, I'm going to stop talking about these because I feel like I'm just going to get mean about it. But no, I will be unhauling these, and I hope that I can give them to someone who would absolutely love them, because they are so beautiful, and I know a lot of people really, really love them. So I'm just going to pass them on. Ooh, oh man. I really feel like March had some tough reads, like trying to talk about those books. All of the emotions that I felt while reading them really came back up, and I was struggling to kind of be coherent and intelligent about such tough subject matter. But I mean, all of the books that I mentioned, I really liked. I actually had a good reading month as far as quality goes, so I'm happy about that. Let's talk April TBR. So the first couple books that I'm going to mention are books that I've actually already started, because I started them in March, was not able to finish them, but I'm about halfway through both of them. So those are, the first one is The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. I've talked about this at length a bunch of times, so I'm not gonna do it again, but I know that we are all so curious about if I was ever gonna read this. And I'm about halfway through it, and like, my goodness, this thing is thick. It's thick, it's dense. I'm gonna save all of the things I have to say about this for a very special video, because I am buddy reading this with Caitlin Bandy from Bandy's Books, and I'm so excited to talk with her about this, because wow, there's gonna be some things to unpack here. The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. I'm halfway through it, and we will have it done in April. Another book I'm already halfway through, that is The House of Last Resort by Christopher Golden. This is a haunted house story about a young couple from America who, thanks to a crazy deal that's going on in this town, were able to buy a house for the cost of €1 in this small Italian town. So they move across the world, across the globe, to a different country to live in this house, and they discover that not all is as it seems. I'm halfway through it, and I'm pretty much enjoying it, but I will be having a full review of this, going into all of my very detailed thoughts on my channel very soon. The next book that I know I'll for sure be reading in April, that is Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austin. This is the author of Everybody in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, a book that I very much enjoyed. This one, it's not very long. I didn't even realize. I just picked this up from the library today, so yeah. I will be reading this for my book club, so excited to get into this. I don't know too much about it. I think it's following a protagonist who is obsessed with space, and I think it's a contemporary novel. I don't really know much about it, but I did love this author's previous work, so excited to get into this. And then we have all of these books that I pulled for my spring TBR. So let's talk about some of the ones that I'm looking to get to in April. The ones I know for certain I will be reading, one of them is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. This is a historical fiction novel about a man who lives in a hotel. And I don't know why or what else it's about, but I do know that everyone who's read this book has really loved it, and it's a 5-star prediction for me. I will be reading this in April 100%. I'm excited to finally get to it because it's been on my TBR for like literally years. I also really want to get to Piglet by Lottie Hazel. This is a contemporary story about a woman who is about to get married. She's very close to being married when I think her life just starts spiraling out of control. And this does have to do with food obsession and again, like pressures of food on women. And I don't really know aside from that, but it does very much follow in the line of the books that I read in March. This is, of course, a fiction novel, and I have been hearing so much hype for this book. I've heard it before I even got it from Aardvark this month, or in March, I should say. So the hype has been real for this book, and I am so excited to dig into it as soon as possible. And then I'd really like to read The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, this short little children's novel about animals in the woods. It just sounds very, very cozy. I don't know like when I'm gonna read it or where I'm gonna get to it in between these books, but I'm really hoping that I can squeeze it into April somehow. Oh my gosh. And then I have this like library haul that I've done. I've really been in the mood for like a contemporary, and not even necessarily romance, but just like a contemporary story, which Piglet absolutely does fit into that category. So maybe my desire to read that will be satisfied here. But a couple other books I have from the library. You Again by Kate Goldbach. This is a New York inspired romance. I don't read much romance, and to be honest, I don't know if this is high on my TBR, but I've been very curious about it. I want to find a romance that I actually like someday. We'll see. I got Mame by Jessica George. This has been on my TBR for a really long time. I'm like super interested in this. This is about like a young woman in London, a young Black woman just finding herself. I believe there's romance discussions in it. I think it's a very contemporary story about this one woman trying to discover who she is, and I've heard a lot of great things about it, and I'm definitely very interested in it. And then we have The Rachel Incident by Carolyn O'Donoghue, an Irish novel that has been getting so much hype. I also adore this cover, like so cute. But to be honest, I don't know what it's about at all. Like I literally have no idea. So we will find out together. Okay, it says a brilliantly funny novel about friends, lovers, Ireland in chaos, and a young woman desperately trying to manage all three. So it does sound like it's a contemporary, not exactly romance. It's primarily contemporary general fiction with romantic elements to it about, once again, a young woman trying to find her place in the world. So clearly that is a theme that I'm kind of gravitating towards, although in this one I do think she's a little bit older, but that seems to be a theme of my book choices recently. It's very odd because I don't ever intentionally pick books that follow in the little thematic groups, but when I look at my TBR overall, or like what I've been reading recently, like I will see these patterns of themes, and I don't know, it's completely unconscious. I don't know what's going on. But the last book from my library haul is Birnam Wood by Eleanor Catton. And this is a book about a group of a very unconventional style of eco-activism where this group of people basically just go around planting wild plants wherever they can. And the leader of this group finds an abandoned farm that they want to use to cultivate and grow more things, but it gets caught up because this land is getting bought by an American billionaire, and this is set in New Zealand, and so it's about their rivalry. It also says a psychological thriller, so I'm very interested in this, but I will be honest, it's hard because this book is so long, and it's a literary fiction, and because I'm reading The Bone Clocks right now, which is also a very long literary fiction, very detailed, it's like I'm not gravitating towards this because I'm reading something that's already so dense, but I do really want to read this, so I want to get around to it, but I just don't know if I can do it. It's suddenly gotten so hot in this room, like what's going on? Like my hair is frizzing up, like all of a sudden it got so humid, I don't know what's going on. Last thing, we need to do the TBR jar. TBR teacup, I always say TBR jar, but TBR teacup, let's figure out what the situation is for the month of March. It's April. My goodness. I'm out of it. Okay. April's prompt is highest rated book on your TBR from Goodreads. Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to do some research for this and take a look at my TBR shelf. Okay, so to do this, I'm gonna go to Goodreads. I'm gonna go to my books, average rating high to low. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. So the very first one on that list, the highest rated on my Goodreads TBR, is one that I do have a physical copy of on my TBR shelf. Let me go get it. Okay, so the highest rated book on my Goodreads TBR and the highest rated book on my physical TBR shelf, this is Vegan Propaganda by Ed Winters. This is Vegan Propaganda and Other Lies the Meat Industry Tells You by Ed Winters. This honestly makes a lot of sense for why it's highest rated. It's currently rated at a 4.64, although I'm gonna guess it probably doesn't have a lot of ratings, but it has 3,835 ratings, 650 reviews. So yeah, pretty low rating, but it does make sense why this would be so highly rated due to the combination of low ratings and the fact that if you're picking up this book, there is a high likelihood that you already know who Ed Winters is, that you already agree with his platform and his message. And because of that, you are going to inherently like the conversations that are being had in this book, which is very much about why veganism is the way of the future. So absolutely, I can understand why this is highly rated. And you know what? I'm happy about it because I've been wanting to read this book since I bought it. It would be great for me to knock off another book from my physical TBR, specifically the nonfiction books, which just get piled up on there and I never ever pull them off. So it would be great to read this month. So there you have it. Those are the books I am planning to read in April. Let me know in the comments down below. Have you read any of these? What did you think of them? And what is your most anticipated book on your April TBR? Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of your day, week, month, and year, and I will see you back here next time. Thanks so much. Bye.